Welcome back. Now, in reprogramming the mind, there are three concepts that are very fundamental, and we are going to delve into them right now. They are affirmations, self-talk, and chants. We're going to look at how affirmation, self-talk, and chants, the role that they play in behavioral control, behavioral change, and in redefining our lifestyles. Now, these three concepts are very, very key when it comes to reprogramming the mind. And affirmation is a form of self-forced meditation or repetition. And take note of the word meditation and repetition. It's a solemn declaration of truth or a solemn declaration of the existence of something. Now, the next word there is self-talk. Self-talk is to talk to one's self, whether silently or loudly. The third one there is chanting. To chant is to say a word or phrase many times in a rhythmic way, usually loudly and with other people. So that is one common denominator for these three words. The common denominator is that they involve a declaration. They involve talking, they involve speaking. Another common denominator is that there is repetition. There is repetition, saying a word or phrase many times in a rhythmic way. The next thing that you will notice is that for all three of them, you can decide to do them quietly, silently, or loudly. Even though for chanting, there is sometimes often an involvement with one or more persons, and the chants sometimes are done loudly. Now, these three concepts are so fundamental, and one of them that we have completely missed out in the Christian faith is that of chanting. There's a sense we do that, in the very loud declarations that we make in church, in some of the songs that we sing, we still do that. But I'm talking about understanding the power of these chants. Now listen, when it comes to addiction, all of the times addictions are products of negative exposures. You were exposed to some kind of sexual abuse or whatever kind of abuse. You were exposed to pictures, videos, words that were spoken to you, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse. There were exposures that became programmed, recorded, your minds became cast like stone in your mind, that began to control and regulate your lives. If addictions are products of negative exposure, then the way to replace them is to do the same thing, but this time a positive exposure. You introduce a positive exposure, whether by way of videos, whether by way of audios, whether they are words, they are verbal, but you begin to introduce a new exposure. Your desired outcome, you now begin to expose your mind to them, to reprogram the mind. The only difference this time is that you must engage the law of repetition. It must apply. The reasons are simple. It takes 8 positive statements to disable 1 negative statement. Negative impressions, programmings of the mind are so potently powerful that you can't just say one thing one time and assume that the job is done. No, you got to say and unsay certain things again and again. That's where the law of repetition comes to play. So we must patiently, intentionally begin to re-expose the mind to the outcome that we desire. Don't forget, in the previous audio, we had said at some time that there is the universal principle that provides that you cannot stop a bad habit. You can only replace them, because nature does not allow vacuum. So the repetition, you bring the desired outcome and repeatedly expose the mind on that value, that statement, that audio, that video, that speech, until the impression grips on the mind and displaces its existing programming. This is where chanting as a scriptural law of reprogramming applies. This is where it applies. No, you begin to chant certain things, certain words, certain pictures, certain audios. You chant them, you declare them, you affirm them, you self-talk them until it brings an elevation of the mind. It raises the mind over and above that which has dominated it up till now. You do that chant until there is a mental, a spiritual, an emotional elevation of the mind over and above that which dominated it at all times. Now, this is so important. Now, for us to achieve this, we must understand that there are two dimensions to an addiction. There is nobody, for example, who, and no matter how addicted, who is perpetually under the urge or the control of an addiction 24/7. Nobody like that. So in the life of an addict, whether it's for drugs, whether it's for sex, whether it's for pornography, whether it's for cigarettes, whatever the person is addicted to, there is always that time when you are yourself, you are normal, you are in control. And there are also those times when you come under pressure. So I'm going to call them the times of calm and the times of pressure. Now, there is a set of activities that you need to undertake during the times of calmness, when you are in control. That is what to do to reprogram the mind and establish a new order. There is also what to do when you come under pressure. And so we're going to look at these two things, what you're going to do in both times, that will help reprogram the mind. This is so important. Now, let's begin with what are you going to do during the times of calmness and control, when you are in your right mind and conditioning, when you can, because we don't prepare for war when there is war. That's not going to work. We prepare for war during the times of peace and calmness, so that by the time it is time for war, we just jump into action and begin to execute. It puts us in the right frame of mind. It puts us in the right frame of the courage, the confidence, the intelligence, the mastery that is needed is already in their proper places, and all we do is confidently engage the enemy. And so, what are we going to do in times of calmness and control? That brings us to the concept of meditation. And there are 3 levels of meditation. And these 3 levels of meditation, the first 2 are the things we got to do during the times of calmness, while the last one is what we must do when we come under pressure. And so let's go into it already. Now, the 3 levels of meditations are the level of thought, the level of muttering, and the level of lowering. Listen to this. In terms of thought, everything in human existence is a product of the seed of thought. If you are going to birth anything new, if you are going to birth a change, if you are going to be able to create a replacement for addiction, it must begin with thought. Thought is your ability to create pictures, mental resources upon which you focus your attention in deep meditation. The problem with thought is that at the onset, thought can be shapeless. Thought can be struggling to have shape and form, but it is thought anyway. What you got to do with thought is to do that which enables that picture in your mind to gain form, better structure, better shape, and clarity. Because the clearer the picture in your mind, the easier it will be possible to make it to create a material equivalent of it. So there must be, the picture in your mind cannot be vague. The thought material must not remain vague as at the beginning. It must gradually and intentionally be graduated into a solid concrete form. You can call that conviction. How do you graduate thought into solid form, into enforceable form, into a form where its material equivalent can become translated? It is what takes us to the next point, which is muttering. But before we go into muttering, it means that for you to reprogram the mind, you must set aside the thought material you want to engage to reprogram the mind. What is the new way you are going to begin to think? What are the things that you are addicted to? A lifestyle. You're consumed by that lifestyle. Now you don't want that no more. So paint a picture of what you want as a replacement to that lifestyle. Let's say addiction makes you enslaved. So now you want a life of dominion. So write down dominion over my behavior, dominion over my lifestyle. Now that thought, that word creates a thought material on which to feed, to focus. But that thought remains vague until you move to the next level, which is muttering. To mutter means to talk to yourself, to talk not loudly, to talk in a way that you are the only one probably hearing yourself. To mutter means you are talking, but you are hearing yourself. That hearing element is so powerful because as you speak and you hear yourself, dominion over my behavior. As you say that and you hear yourself, that word, that thought material, that concept begins to gain a grip on your mind. So hearing what you muted is important, because faith, belief itself, comes by hearing. And the more repeatedly you hear that, the more it becomes a subject of conviction, profound conviction. The more you hear that, the more it is impressed on your mind. The more you hear it, the more the picture becomes concrete. The more you hear it, the more it overwhelms your mind. It takes control of your mind. The more you hear it, the more it takes you over. It's what is called saturation. The reason you are muttering and you are doing it repeatedly is so that there is saturation. A level of saturation that overwhelms what is existing, what has been programmed into that mind, can only be displaced by repeated muttering, repeated verbalization to the point of saturation. Now, this is what you must do. I'm going to talk about the third one later. This is what you must do during the times of calmness. You pick up thought materials, you begin to mute thought materials that represent your desired outcome. Then you begin to mute them. You begin to declare them. You declare them until they become saturated. They take you over. These are very practical steps for replacement and for reprogramming the mind. It is so profound. Now, a lot of us do not understand the power of this truth. It is the reason why, for those of us that are Christians, we have not been able to maximize. We have not touched even a percent of all that the Christian faith promises, all that it portends for us. We've not touched a percent of it because we have not understood how to reprogram the mind. It is so profound. We don't understand how to respond to the word of God. That is why we are losing big time when it comes to experiencing what the word of God says. Unless we understand how thought is created and how thought is translated into its material equivalent through thought and muttering, we do not maximize. We do not. So I'm going to come right back to share with us how to respond to the word of God, and how that makes the word of God become not just literature, historical facts. It become a bundle of power that becomes our experience. And then after that, I'm going to provide for us thought materials that we're going to engage to reprogram the mind in this specific direction. I'll be right back.